Toronto Overdose Action Plan, Overdose Training. This module has been developed for staff who are interested in expanding their knowledge base on overdose and implementing practical strategies within their practice settings. It comes in the wake of mounting community requests for guidance and training. Staff have been reporting that their service users are experiencing overdoses in their community and on site at their services. Staff may find themselves in a situation where they can intervene in an overdose event. This module is one component of a comprehensive training to reduce overdose deaths and other negative impacts of opioid overdose in Toronto. The purpose of this module is to raise awareness and provide education on the signs of potential overdose. This module will provide an overview of the landscapes of overdose within Toronto, the City of Toronto's action plan, the three main types of overdose and response, as well as some basic information on naloxone. If you're interested in expanding your knowledge on overdose response and the steps involved in administering naloxone beyond the scope of this module, please register for our upcoming in-class training sessions on overdose response and administration of naloxone. The Toronto Overdose Action Plan was adopted by the Board of Health on March 20th, 2017. It recommends specific actions for the City of Toronto, the Province of Ontario, and the Government of Canada. It is important to stress that this plan is not our starting point on the issue of overdose. There has already been a lot of work being done in the community by Toronto Public Health, community agencies, other city divisions, and other governments. The action plan builds on these efforts. A key focus for the plan is what more we can do at the local level, as well as actions for the provincial and federal governments. The action plan consists of 10 broad strategies with specific actions listed under each. If you'd like more information, please visit the Toronto Drug Strategies webpage. The second strategy in the Overdose Action Plan emphasizes the need for us to do more to equip staff and community members with the knowledge and tools to both prevent and respond to overdoses. Harm reduction is an approach that aims to reduce drug-related harms experienced by individuals and communities without necessarily reducing the consumption of drugs. The Works has been in operation for 25 years and has played an integral role in reducing drug use-related harms in Toronto by taking leadership in the area of harm reduction. The Works distributes safer drug use equipment, provides education and counseling for substance users. The Works also operates Point, a take-home naloxone program that offers overdose response training and free access to naloxone for opioid users, their friends, and family. The Works has been tasked with developing an overdose prevention and response training for staff in the City of Toronto and community services, including organizational overdose protocols. As in other communities, far too many people in Toronto are experiencing and also dying from drug overdose. These deaths are largely preventable, and we need to do more. Between 2004 and 2015, we saw a 73% increase in overdose deaths in Toronto. Of particular concern is the rising number of opioid deaths, including from heroin and fentanyl. The black line on this graph shows the rise in opioid deaths in Toronto, from 44 in 2004 to 135 in 2015. The orange line is cocaine, and the green line is alcohol. About half of the deaths caused by opioids were caused by a single drug at toxic levels, and in the other half, other drugs were toxic along with opioids, most commonly another opioid, cocaine, or alcohol. A drug overdose occurs when the body is overwhelmed by exposure to a toxic amount of drugs, or a combination of drugs. As a result, the body is unable to maintain or monitor functions necessary for life. These functions include breathing, heart rate, body temperature, and consciousness. Recognize an overdose. This module will review the three types of overdoses most commonly seen in Toronto: hallucinogen, stimulant, and opioid overdose. The central nervous system regulates basic life functions: breathing, heart rate, temperature, and the level of consciousness. In examining overdose, the central nervous system will be used as the focal point to explain the physiology of both stimulant and opioid overdose. Substances can be classified by the effect they have on the body. Stimulants are a group of drugs that can speed up processes in the body, including heart rate, and cause people to be more alert. Stimulants exert their effect on the body at three main areas. Firstly, an increase in blood pressure increases the risk of a ruptured blood vessel in the brain. In turn, narrowing the blood vessels reduces blood flow. With more activity, the heart needs more oxygen, and narrowing of blood vessels result in a reduced blood supply, which can then lead to a heart attack. This can have an effect on the body's ability to cool itself, which can lead to a dangerous increase in body temperature, and ultimately organ failure and death. Stimulants impact the body on two levels, physiologically and psychologically. Physiological responses include a rise in blood pressure, faster breathing, quicker pulse, increased temperature, heightened alertness, and larger pupil size. The immediate psychological impacts include an elevated sense of well-being, euphoria, excitement, heightened alertness, and increases in motor activity. In examining stimulant overdose, the most prevalent symptom reported in clients is chest pain within the initial 3 hours following use. Seizures largely occur within 90 minutes of stimulant use. Other cardiac-related symptoms include sweating, palpitations, and shortness of breath. In addition, crack cocaine smokers may report respiratory symptoms, including cough, black sputum, chest pain, shortness of breath, and asthma. If a person is exhibiting signs of stimulant overdose, including rigid or jerking limbs, seizures, rapidly elevating temperature and/or pulse, or chest pain, this is a medical emergency. Call 911 immediately and follow your organization's emergency response procedures. Hallucinogens belong to a group of substances that cause an alteration in thought, process, and mood. Common signs and symptoms of hallucinogen overdose include heightened risk of suicide, increased blood pressure, and irregular breathing. Opioids belong to a group of drugs known as depressants. Depressants are substances that slow the body down and can make people sleepier. Opioids may be prescribed or used illegally to reduce pain, manage opioid dependence, or produce a state of relaxation. Common opioids include heroin, fentanyl, morphine, methadone, codeine, and oxycodone. It is important to note that in Toronto yearly, around half of all fatal drug overdoses involve two or more drugs. Predominantly alcohol has been known to increase the risk of opioid overdose. Opioids exert their effects on the body in three main ways. Firstly, opioids bind to the receptors in the brainstem that regulate breathing, and in turn, opioids decrease respiratory drive and the urge to breathe. As breathing decreases and eventually stops, there is less oxygen in the blood, and the lack of oxygen causes brain damage. Oxygen starvation eventually results in organ failure of the heart and then the brain, and eventually death. It is important to note that this process is not immediate. It takes time. However, there is no time to waste, and we need to respond immediately. It is important to be able to recognize if someone is overdosing versus on the nod, intoxicated. When someone is on the nod, they are really high and may or may not overdose. It is important to keep your eye on them. Make sure they are responsive, still breathing normally, and in a safe space if they go under. If someone is on the nod, they do not need naloxone. It might seem difficult to differentiate between overdose and being on the nod, especially if you're stressed out that someone has gone under. Indications that someone is on the nod include the person's muscles become relaxed, speech is slowed or slurred, the person may be sleepy looking, but will respond to stimulation like yelling or a sternum rub. The person's head may be nodding, meaning that their head drops as if falling asleep, then spontaneously or with stimulation props up again. If a person is exhibiting signs of opioid overdose, including blue lips, will not wake up, slow or irregular breathing, this is a medical emergency. Call 911 immediately and follow your organization's emergency response procedures. This is an example of emergency call script used by the works. Having an emergency services call script available for staff is helpful in any emergency situation. It can provide order, reduce potential chaos, and define role responsibility. It is important to start with the most pressing medical issue. For example, the person is not breathing, or the person is experiencing a seizure. Specify the scope of your practice, as this will help EMS triage your call. It is important to consider the type of emergencies you are unable to manage. For example, clearly state that your practice setting is not equipped to manage acute medical emergencies, which require oxygen and other advanced treatments. Regularly check all of the spaces in your service setting where people might use substances, including the washroom. As we may not like to admit, people use in our washrooms. Make these checks part of your regular shifts. Be sure that washroom doors can be opened from the outside in case you need to intervene. And most importantly, know the signs of overdose and be prepared to respond. Naloxone. Naloxone is an antidote which can be used to temporarily reverse opioid overdose. If the person has not used opioids, naloxone will not have an effect, making CPR and other life-saving measures imperative. Naloxone does not destroy opioids, so the overdose may return and more doses of naloxone may be needed. This is most likely if large doses of highly toxic opioids like fentanyl or long-acting opioids like methadone are involved. Both naloxone and opioids attach to the same receptor sites in the brain, and this site affects breathing. If too many opioids are attached to the receptors, breathing slows or stops. Naloxone binds more tightly than opioids, so it bumps off existing opioids and restores breathing and reverses overdose. Naloxone kits are currently available for people who use opioids, their friends and family, at the Works and 3 community health centers within Toronto. Also, as of recently, 220 pharmacies in Ontario have been funded to dispense naloxone for free. For more information on the Community Naloxone Distribution Program and the Ontario Naloxone Pharmacy Program, please follow the contact information provided on this slide.